Imagine picking up your last emergency call of the day and hearing a 6-year-old whisper through the static, "I'm hungry," and the walls are crawling. What would you do if that child turned out to be your daughter and you never even knew she existed? Today's story is about a man, a voice in the dark, and a bond that no storm could ever break. Before we dive in, let us know where in the world you're watching from. We love hearing your stories, wishing you a beautiful, meaningful day, because sometimes miracles begin with a single call. The sun had long disappeared behind the cloud-choked skies of Riverside County, casting the city in a steel-gray silence. It was the kind of winter evening that clung to the bones, cold and without promise, the air damp with the memory of an earlier rain that left the streets slick and glinting under the soft yellow glow of the streetlights. The city, once humming with the bustle of day, now held its breath as night crept in like a cautious animal. Officer Michael Bennett sat behind the wheel of his patrol car, engine idling low, fingers tapping the steering wheel as he counted the minutes until his shift ended. At 36, Michael had the weathered look of a man who'd spent too long walking through other people's broken moments. His dark brown hair was neatly trimmed, though flecks of gray had started to appear at the temples. His uniform was pressed, his badge polished, but his eyes, deep set and the color of dry bark, held a quiet fatigue. Years on the job had taught him how to navigate chaos with calm precision, but beneath his composed surface was a heart that had learned to beat quietly through disappointments. He wasn't unfriendly, but he kept people at arm's length. Colleagues described him as dependable but distant. After years of failed relationships and the haunting absence of family, Michael had accepted solitude as the price of self-control. His shift had been long, 12 hours of parking disputes, noise complaints, and routine patrols in a town that was steadily hollowing out. As he reached for the lukewarm coffee in the cup holder, his radio crackled with unexpected life. The voice that followed wasn't the usual dispatcher. It was small, hesitant, a child. "Hello? Is anybody there?" Michael sat upright, instantly alert. The voice was fragile, laced with static and shallow breathing. I'm really hungry," the girl whispered. "And there are scary things crawling on the walls." He grabbed his radio. "This is Unit 47. I'm receiving what sounds like a distress call from a minor. Can you trace this signal?" The dispatcher came back quickly, tone clipped but concerned. "We're tracking it now, Officer Bennett. Address comes back as 1247 Maple Street. That's in the abandoned housing district." Michael's breath caught. That stretch of Maple had been condemned for years, forgotten by banks and ignored by the city. The east side of Riverside was where hope had gone to rot. Rows of boarded-up homes lined cracked sidewalks. No one was supposed to be there, especially not a child. "I'm responding immediately," he said, turning the key in the ignition as his patrol car growled forward. His headlights cut through the evening fog, casting long shadows between skeletal trees. As he drove, the girl's voice looped in his head. There was something in it, something raw, unfiltered. Fear, yes, but also something he couldn't quite name. Something that tugged at a long-buried part of him. He reached 1247 Maple Street within minutes. The house looked like it belonged to a nightmare. Porch slanted like a broken jaw. Windows secured with splintered plywood. Vines clawing up the siding like desperate hands. The mailbox hung open, rusted. There was no sign of life, and yet he felt it. Stepping out of the car, Michael unholstered his flashlight, its narrow beam slicing through the dark. He moved cautiously, boots crunching over debris-strewn concrete, one hand resting near his holster. As he stepped onto the sagging porch, the smell hit him. Mold, rot, and something else he couldn't quite place. Something sour, metallic, almost like copper. "This is the police," he called, voice firm but gentle. "Is anyone there?" A pause, then, "Are you the nice man I called?" The voice was close now, muffled but clear. Michael's heart pounded. "Yes, sweetie, I'm Officer Bennett. Can you tell me where you are?" "In the living room," she answered. "The door doesn't close right." He pushed on the swollen wood of the front door. It gave way with a groan. The beam of his flashlight swept across the room, revealing peeling wallpaper and furniture buried under dust. In the far corner, huddled on what looked like an old twin mattress, was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 6. Her blonde hair was matted into curls, streaked with grime and tangled like old straw. Her pink dress was too big, hanging off her shoulders like hand-me-down sorrow. Her cheeks were smudged with dirt, and her knees bore small red scrapes. She sat cross-legged, a small metal bowl clutched tightly in her lap like it was treasure. Michael stepped forward, slowing his pace. "Hi there, sweetheart," he said softly. "What's your name?" The girl looked up at him with wide, sea-glass blue eyes, eyes that stopped him cold. There was something heartbreakingly familiar about them. She hesitated, then whispered one word that tore the ground out from under him. "Daddy!" Michael froze. The air left his lungs in a rush. He blinked, certain he had misheard. But her gaze was steady, innocent, hopeful. "Sweetie," he said, voice trembling slightly. "What did you just call me?" "You're wearing the blue uniform," she said, holding up a folded piece of paper. "Just like in the picture," Mommy said. "My daddy was a police officer who helped people." Michael crouched, his hands shaking as she handed him the photograph. It was old, creased from being handled too often. A photo of him, taken about 7 years ago when he was a rookie, smiling in a crisp new uniform. "What picture is this?" he asked, stunned. "Mommy gave it to me," she said. "She told me if I ever got scared, I should find the man in the blue uniform with kind eyes. She said he would take care of me." Michael looked down at her, his thoughts spinning. His voice was barely audible, a whisper. "What's your name?" "Emily," she replied. "Emily Moore?" He nearly dropped the flashlight. The name, Moore, was like a sudden crack of lightning in a darkened sky. Angela Moore. A girl from another life. A name he hadn't heard in years. A memory he hadn't allowed himself to revisit. And now this little girl, sitting in a crumbling house with her arms wrapped around a bowl and his photograph in her hands, had just called him her father. Michael knelt there for several seconds, flashlight casting a soft arc of light between them as dust motes swirled like pale ghosts. Emily's blue eyes stayed locked on his face, filled with a trust that frightened him more than any gunfire or high-speed chase ever had. In his line of work, trust was a fragile thing, often misplaced and quickly shattered. But here was this child, no older than 6, looking at him like he was the only safe thing left in her world. And she had called him Daddy. He didn't know if it was real. He didn't know if it could be real, but he couldn't ignore what was in front of him. "Sweetheart," he said softly, his voice barely steady. "Where is your mommy now?" The little girl tilted her head slightly and looked down at the bowl in her lap. "She went away a long time ago," she whispered. "She said she might get sick and not come back, but she told me to be brave and to wait for the man with the kind eyes." Michael swallowed hard. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the photograph. It was him, no question. Same chin, same awkward smile, same badge number on the collar. The picture was creased in half and laminated in a clear, cheap plastic. On the back, in careful handwriting, someone had written, "If she's ever in danger, find the officer in this picture. He'll protect her." He looked up again. Emily was watching him with quiet intensity, her small fingers tracing the rim of the metal bowl. "Mommy said you didn't know about me. She said it wasn't your fault." Michael's throat felt tight, his voice barely audible. "Did your mommy tell you her name?" "Angela Moore," Emily said instantly. "She used to sing to me when I had bad dreams. She had yellow hair like mine. She said you were brave." Michael felt the name hit him like a fist. Angela. She'd been just 19 when they met, a fragile girl staying at a women's shelter downtown. He'd been a rookie then, assigned to check on a reported noise complaint. Instead, he'd found her curled on a cot reading a worn children's book aloud to another woman's toddler. There was something about her, something strong beneath the fear. He'd started visiting the shelter every few weeks, at first just to check in, then to bring her donated books, then to talk. But she had disappeared one night without warning. The shelter said she left on her own. No forwarding address, no phone call. He had always wondered what had happened to her. Now, staring into the eyes of her daughter, possibly his daughter, he was overwhelmed by a flood of memories he thought he'd buried. "Emily," he said gently, Do you have anything else your mommy gave you? She nodded and reached into a small fabric bag beside the mattress. From within, she pulled a crumpled envelope and a necklace with a tiny star-shaped pendant. The chain was delicate and a little tarnished, but the charm gleamed, faintly under the flashlight. Mommy said this star was magic, she said. She gave it to me when she got sick and said it would keep me safe. She said when I found you, I should share it with you. Michael took the envelope carefully and glanced inside. There were folded papers. One looked like a hospital birth certificate, the other a handwritten note. He didn't open them yet. His hands were still shaking. Outside, wind rattled the loose shingles. A faint creak echoed from somewhere upstairs, but it was likely just the bones of the house settling deeper into itself. Michael turned back to Emily. Have you been staying here by yourself? Emily nodded, pressing her lips together. At first, Mommy's cousin was here, but she left. She said she was coming back, but she never did. Michael's brow furrowed. How long ago was that? Emily frowned in concentration. I think 2 sleeps, maybe 3. His heart dropped. A 6-year-old, abandoned in a decaying house, left with a photo, a necklace, and a ghost of a promise. Have you eaten? She shook her head. I had cereal, but it got all soggy. The water from the sink tastes funny. He rose to his feet, the ache in his knees grounding him back to reality. His training kicked in. First, secure the child. Second, call it in. Third, get her to safety. We're getting you out of here, Emily, he said, his voice firm but kind. Do you trust me? She nodded immediately. You're my daddy, she said simply, as though it were the most obvious truth in the world. Michael turned on his radio. This is Unit 47. I need immediate backup and medical assistance at 1247 Maple Street. I have a 6-year-old female, conscious but possibly dehydrated and malnourished. We're preparing to transport. He knelt again, now eye level with her. Can I carry you, sweetheart? Yes, she said softly, reaching for him. When he scooped her up, she felt lighter than she should have. Her arms wrapped around his neck without hesitation, and her head rested against his shoulder, as if it had belonged there all along. Her warmth soaked into him in waves, piercing through layers of uniform and doubt. She smelled like dust and old laundry, and something faintly sweet, like bubble gum that had long lost its flavor. As he stepped into the night air, Michael glanced once more at the ruin of the house behind them. His breath misted in front of him, sharp against the cold. Emily shifted slightly in his arms and murmured, Do I have to go back there? No, sweetie, he said, tightening his hold. You're not going back there. Blue and red lights cut through the fog at the end of the street. An ambulance arrived first, headlights flaring. Paramedics stepped out, followed by another patrol unit. One of the medics, a tall woman with short black curls and a gentle demeanor, approached. That her? She asked softly. Michael nodded. Name's Emily. She says her mother passed. Been here alone at least 2 nights, possibly more. The paramedic, whose name tag read Rachel M., reached out with gloved hands. We'll get her checked. Can she ride with us? She doesn't want to let go, Michael said. Rachel smiled. Then you ride with us, officer. We've got room. Inside the warmth of the ambulance, Emily clung to Michael's arm while Rachel checked her vitals. Little dehydrated, Rachel muttered. Pulse is steady. Temps low, but not dangerous. You did good, kiddo. Michael didn't respond. He was staring at the star necklace Emily had tucked into his palm. It glimmered in the light of the ambulance ceiling like a sliver of memory made real. And then, in a quiet moment, Emily whispered, Are you going to disappear like everyone else? Michael looked down at her. Her eyes were barely open now, lashes brushing her cheeks. She looked so small, so breakable, but there was steel in her voice. He leaned in and whispered back, No, Emily, I'm not going anywhere, I promise. The lights of St. Anne's Hospital flickered like watchful stars above the quiet street as the ambulance pulled into the emergency bay. The night had grown colder, the rain returning in a gentle mist that clung to the windows like memory. Inside the vehicle, Officer Michael Bennett sat with Emily still nestled against his side. She hadn't spoken again after whispering her fear about being abandoned. She had simply held onto his sleeve as if it were a lifeline. The rear doors swung open, and a pair of ER nurses took over, soft-spoken and efficient. One of them, a middle-aged woman with warm brown skin and thin-framed glasses, gently extended her arms. Her name tag read, Nora Jameson, OHR-N. She had a motherly presence, the kind that could ease a child's tension with a look. "Hey there, sweetheart," Nora said, her voice like warm soup. "We're going to take care of you now, okay?" Emily stirred but tightened her grip on Michael's sleeve. "She doesn't want to let go," he said softly, his voice hoarse from hours of tension. Nora nodded. "Then you stay close. We'll take her vitals first. The rest can wait." Inside a small triage room, medical equipment beeped quietly. A young male pediatrician entered moments later. He was in his early 30s, wiry and sharp-featured with pale skin and close-cropped black hair, moving with the tired precision of someone who'd been on shift for far too long. His name was Dr. Caleb Martinez, and his voice was calm and neutral. "Vitals are stable," he said after a quick check. "Dehydrated, a little underweight, but nothing that an IV and some meals won't fix. I'll order a full panel and a trauma consult." "She's going to be okay?" Michael asked. Dr. Martinez gave a short nod. "Physically, yes. Emotionally, that's harder to say. She's been through something. That's clear." Michael watched as the nurse placed a hospital bracelet on Emily's tiny wrist. Her eyes remained fixed on him the entire time. "Can she stay the night?" he asked. "She'll be admitted until a caseworker is assigned," Dr. Martinez said. "Protocol, especially for minors found without legal guardians. CPS will be notified within the hour." Michael exhaled slowly and looked down at Emily. "I'll be right outside, okay?" "No," she whispered. "Don't leave." "I won't," he promised again. He stayed. An hour later, after Emily had fallen asleep with the IV drip snaking gently from her arm, Michael stood outside her room, arms folded tightly across his chest. Exhaustion was beginning to crawl into his bones, but his mind was racing too fast to rest. He stared at the crumpled envelope in his hand, the one Emily had pulled from her bag. He hadn't opened it yet. Somehow, it felt sacred. The hallway was quiet, the hospital winding down from its nightly chaos. Nurses passed with soft steps, voices low. At the far end of the corridor, a woman approached. She was tall, with neatly parted hair the color of steel, pulled into a professional twist. Her navy suit was immaculate, her heels soft against the linoleum. She had the look of someone who'd seen too much and learned to remain composed through all of it. "Officer Bennett?" she asked gently. Michael straightened. "Yes." She offered a card. "Helen Jacobs. I'm with Child Protective Services. I was assigned to Emily's case. The hospital notified us." Helen looked to be in her early 50s with a tired but intelligent gaze. Her voice was calm, practiced, and careful, like someone who had learned long ago to listen before judging. Her presence didn't feel intrusive, but it was clear she wasn't here to offer comfort. She was here to do her job. Michael nodded and gestured to a bench near the vending machines. "You want to sit?" They did. "What can you tell me?" Helen asked. Michael recounted everything: the call from dispatch, the address, the condition of the house, the photograph, the necklace, the name, Angela Moore. At the mention of that name, Helen's brow tightened slightly. "Angela Moore," she echoed. "That name is in our system." Michael's stomach turned. Helen pulled a tablet from her bag and typed quickly. "Yes, she was known to us. Entered the shelter system 7 years ago. Reported trauma history. Attempted to enroll in vocational training programs. Disappeared from records about 6 years ago. She never contacted anyone? Not officially." Helen tapped again. "But she left behind a journal. When she passed away, it was found with her belongings. She wrote extensively about her daughter. And about you." Michael blinked. "Me?" Helen nodded, pulling a manila folder from her bag. "She mentioned a police officer named Michael Bennett multiple times. According to her writing, she was too scared to tell you she was pregnant." Michael felt the blood drain from his face. "Where is she now?" Helen's expression softened. "Angela passed away 11 months ago. Kidney failure, untreated. She'd arranged for a cousin to care for Emily, but the placement wasn't stable. That cousin vanished from our radar 3 months ago. We've been searching for Emily since." Michael looked away, jaw tight, heart pounding. Helen handed him a letter. It was folded in quarters, the paper worn but intact. Angela's handwriting was neat, elegant, and filled with emotion. Dear Emily, if something ever happens to me, I want you to know that your father is a good man. His name is Michael Bennett. He helps people. He has kind eyes and a quiet heart. He doesn't know about you, but that's my fault, not his. I was scared. I didn't know if I was strong enough. But I know that if you ever find him, he will protect you. He will love you. Love always. Mommy? Michael stared at the words, as if they might disappear. He had thought the past was something he had buried years ago. Now, it was looking him straight in the eye. She believed in you, Helen said softly. Michael nodded slowly. I want a DNA test. It's already been requested. Results will be back tomorrow. Helen leaned back slightly. I have to ask, Officer Bennett. If it turns out she is yours, what do you want to do? Michael didn't hesitate. I want to take care of her. Helen studied him carefully. It's not simple. Emily has been through a lot. Trauma leaves marks that don't fade with warm meals and safe beds. I understand, Michael said, but I can't walk away. Helen nodded, standing. Good. Because if this test comes back positive, you're going to have a long road ahead. As Helen left, Michael returned to Emily's room. She was still asleep, curled up in the hospital bed like a worn-out sparrow. The necklace lay on the pillow beside her. Michael gently picked it up and held it in his palm. The star charm felt warm, as if it carried something real, something enduring. He sat in the chair beside her, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. The storm of emotion inside him had not settled, but there was a strange peace taking root beneath the chaos. A fragile peace, built on the soft weight of a child's belief, and the haunting echo of a woman's faith in him. Whatever tomorrow brought, he would face it, not for himself, for her. Morning light filtered weakly through the high windows of St. Anne's, casting pale streaks across the tiled floor of the pediatric wing. It was a cold, brittle sort of sunlight, the kind that didn't warm, only revealed. Outside, frost clung to car windshields and leafless trees, but inside, room 306, the world had shrunk to the quiet hum of machines and the soft breaths of a sleeping child. Michael Bennett had not slept. He sat in the same chair he had occupied for hours, his elbows on his knees, hands clasped, watching Emily. Her cheeks had regained some color overnight. A new hospital gown covered her small frame, and her star necklace rested on the blanket near her hand, glinting under the fluorescence. Every few minutes she stirred slightly, murmuring something in her dreams, sometimes reaching out as though searching for something she couldn't name. Michael had memorized the curve of her face in sleep. The way her brow twitched when the IV tugged, the way she curled slightly inward like someone used to making herself smaller. She was so much like Angela, it hurt. And yet, there was something else in her. A fierce kind of hope, even in her silence. At precisely 9:47 a.m., Michael's phone buzzed. Officer Bennett, came the voice of Dr. Martinez from the other end, steady and clinical. DNA results are in. Can you come down to the third-floor consult room? Michael stood so quickly the chair scraped loudly against the tile. Emily stirred. He bent down, brushing a hand gently across her hair. I'll be back soon, sweetheart. She mumbled something incomprehensible and rolled onto her side. Downstairs, the consult room was small and windowless, the walls lined with laminated medical posters. Helen Jacobs was already there, standing with her arms crossed, her posture rigid. Her eyes, however, softened slightly when Michael entered. Dr. Martinez sat at the small round table, a folder in front of him. Michael didn't sit. Well, Dr. Martinez opened the file slowly, as if hesitant to say the words aloud. The test confirms a 99.99% match. You are Emily Moore's biological father. The air in the room seemed to disappear. Michael had suspected. He had hoped. But hearing it was something else entirely. His legs gave a slight tremble, and he reached for the back of the chair, steadying himself. She's mine, he whispered. She is, Helen said quietly. By blood, but now comes the hard part. Michael looked up sharply. There's more? Helen nodded. The court still has to evaluate custody. You've had no preparation, no legal recognition of paternity until today. CPS will want a home visit, psychological evaluations, trauma-informed parenting classes. The judge may still decide that a more experienced family is better suited. I'm not letting her go, Michael said, his voice hardening. No one's taking her today, Helen assured. But I want you to understand this won't be easy. Love isn't enough. I know, he said, but it's where I'll start. Helen placed a hand on his arm, just briefly. Good, then let's get started. Back in Emily's room, she was awake, sitting up, rubbing her eyes with her fists. When she saw Michael, she smiled, a soft, sleepy smile that twisted something deep inside him. Hi, Daddy, she said, with the easy certainty of someone who had never doubted it. Michael sat beside her, taking her hand in his. The doctor just told me something important. What? I really am your daddy, he said, voice breaking a little. It's true. Emily looked at him with those wide blue eyes and slowly reached beneath her pillow. She pulled out the photograph again, the one of him in uniform. Mommy said you had kind eyes. She was right. Michael laughed softly, a tear slipping down his cheek. She was right about a lot of things. Emily leaned into him, resting her head on his side. He held her carefully, aware of the IV lines and the band on her wrist. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Then she reached into her bag again and pulled out something new. A small, handmade doll, no bigger than his palm. It was stitched from scrap fabric, the yarn hair yellow, like Angela's. It had one button eye and the other drawn on with pen. Faded from love. Mommy made her, Emily said. Her name is Hope. Michael took the doll gently. She's beautiful. She says families stay together, even when they're far apart. Michael couldn't reply. His throat was too tight. Later that afternoon, a knock at the door interrupted the quiet. Helen entered, followed by a hospital social worker, a man in his 40s named Greg Lynn, tall and soft-spoken, with a clipboard and wire-rimmed glasses. He introduced himself and asked Michael to step into the hallway. Just standard procedure, he explained. Greg's voice was measured, professional, but not unkind. We're beginning initial documentation. Helen's team will process paternity paperwork, but the court requires a petition for custody. Are you prepared to initiate that? I am, Michael said. Then I need some information. Employment, address, housing situation. Michael hesitated. I live in a one-bedroom apartment, alone. It's not exactly child-friendly. Greg noted something on his clipboard. That's okay. It's a starting point. What matters now is stability, commitment, and willingness to grow. Michael nodded. She's all I'm thinking about. Inside the room, Helen knelt beside Emily's bed, speaking softly. Emily looked up when Michael re-entered. Did they say I can come home with you? Michael crouched at her bedside. Not yet, but we're working on it. There are some things we have to do first. Her face fell slightly. Because I'm too much trouble? No, he said quickly. You're not trouble at all. This is just the world being slow. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm learning how to be the best daddy I can be. Emily considered that, then nodded. Mama used to say the best things take time. Michael kissed her forehead. She was very wise. As the sky outside turned pale with the promise of snow, Michael sat with Emily, listening as she told him stories Angela had once told her, about stars that granted wishes and the man in blue who protected people even when they didn't know they needed it. When she drifted to sleep again, Michael opened the manila envelope Helen had given him earlier. Inside was Angela's journal, worn and delicate, pages filled with ink and longing. One line caught his eye immediately. I think I'm falling in love with the man in blue, even though I know I'll never be brave enough to tell him. Michael closed the journal and looked out the window where the first flakes of snow were beginning to fall. He didn't know how to be a father, but he knew he wouldn't walk away. 4 days had passed since that quiet snowfall at St. Anne's, and now the city had changed again. The cold remained, but the sun had returned, low and wintry, casting long golden shadows across the sidewalks and roofs of Riverside. At the end of a modest cul-de-sac on the north side of town, a white sedan pulled into the small parking lot of a 2-story apartment building with faded red bricks and black wrought iron balconies. It was nothing special, just another complex among dozens, But for Michael Bennett, Unit 3C had suddenly become the most important space in the world. He stood outside the door now, gripping a ring of new keys. His heart pounded with a strange nervous energy. He had spent the last 72 hours assembling flat-pack furniture, taping colorful decals onto white walls, and lining shelves with storybooks and stuffed animals. It was a 2-bedroom unit. He'd moved in 2 days ago after fast-tracking the lease with his own savings. The second bedroom had a soft lavender rug, a small twin bed with a yellow blanket, a dresser with stickers, and on the windowsill, a glass jar of paper stars Emily had folded in the hospital. She said they were for good dreams. Michael turned the key and opened the door. Helen Jacobs stepped inside behind him. She wore a beige coat, clipboard tucked under her arm, glasses low on her nose. She scanned the living room, clean, sparse, but lived in. A couch, a modest TV, a small round table, and beside it, a row of children's books already set in order by author name. "Someone's been busy," she said dryly. "I don't sleep much," Michael admitted. "Never really did." Helen's gaze drifted to the second bedroom. "May I?" He nodded. She disappeared into the room, and for a moment he heard only silence, then the faint sound of her heels on the wood floor returning. "She'll like it," Helen said softly. "Will it be enough?" he asked. "That depends on you." Michael ran a hand over the back of his neck. He looked older this week. The quiet confidence he once carried like a badge now seemed weighted with uncertainty. And yet, beneath that uncertainty was something more permanent: commitment. Helen glanced at the folder she'd brought. "You're scheduled to begin the parenting course next week. Weekly check-ins with Dr. Monroe. You've submitted proof of income, health insurance, and references from your department. Frankly, Michael, this is more effort than I see from people who've had 9 months to prepare. Emily doesn't have 9 months to wait." Helen looked up sharply, and then her face softened. "Ready to see her?" she asked. Michael nodded, already grabbing his coat. 15 minutes later, they pulled into the driveway of the temporary foster home. It was a gray split level with white shutters and a trimmed lawn, owned by Mrs. Esther Patterson, a retired school teacher who had fostered over a dozen children in the last decade. She was in her 70s, short and full-bodied, with curly white hair and hands that moved with brisk confidence. She opened the door before Michael could knock, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "She's been waiting by the window since breakfast," Esther said with a smile. "Come in, Officer Bennett." Michael stepped inside. The air smelled of cinnamon and chamomile tea. There were quilts on the sofa and crayon drawings taped to the walls. And in the middle of the hallway, barefoot in polka dot socks, stood Emily. She was wearing the blue dress he'd given her at the hospital. Her hair had been combed and tied into 2 neat pigtails with ribbon bows. In her arms, she cradled the handmade doll, Hope, and when she saw him, her face broke into a light that made Michael's chest ache. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I did," he said. Emily rushed forward and hugged him with the strength of a child who had spent too long unsure if hugs would come back. "Can I go with you now?" she asked, eyes wide. Michael crouched. "Yes, if you want to. Your room's ready." "Did you remember the nightlight?" "I remembered the nightlight, and the book about the bear who gets lost in the snow." She smiled and nodded solemnly. "Okay, I'm ready." Helen gave Mrs. Patterson a brief update while Emily grabbed her small backpack and put on her coat. Before leaving, she turned to Esther and hugged her tightly. "Thank you for taking care of me," she said softly. "You be good to your daddy," Esther replied, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're both learning, but I think you'll do just fine." The drive home was quiet. Emily clutched the doll in her lap, gazing out the window as the houses passed. When they reached the apartment building, Michael parked and helped her down from the car. She held his hand tightly as they walked up the stairs. When they reached the door, Michael stopped. "This is your home now," he said. "Our home." Emily looked at the number on the door. "Do we get to make the rules?" Michael smiled. "We make them together." Inside, she wandered from room to room, wide-eyed and quiet. When she reached her bedroom, she stood in the doorway for a long time, then walked slowly to the dresser, touching the edge with her fingers. "You remembered the blanket?" she said. "Yellow's my favorite." He knelt beside her. "I want you to feel safe here." She looked up. "Is this forever?" Michael hesitated. It's the beginning of forever. That night, after dinner, mac and cheese at her request, Emily climbed into bed with Hope tucked under one arm and the star necklace hanging from her neck. Michael sat on the floor beside her, back against the wall, reading aloud. When the story was over, she yawned. Daddy? Yes, baby girl? Even if I have nightmares, you'll still stay? I'll always stay. She reached out her hand toward his. Then I think maybe this is what home feels like. Michael took her hand and held it until her breathing slowed. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. The court hearing was still weeks away. The parenting class hadn't even started, and his own self-doubt still sat in the shadows like an old friend. But in that moment, in that small lavender room filled with folded stars and second chances, Michael knew something he hadn't known in years. He wasn't alone anymore. 2 weeks had passed since Emily moved in, and Riverside had entered one of its rare wet seasons. The city, usually dry and windblown, now simmered beneath heavy clouds and low-hanging mist. The streets smelled of soaked pavement and pine, and the days seemed to fade into one another like pages smudged by rain. Inside, apartment 3C, Michael stood in the narrow kitchen, chopping carrots for soup. He'd never been much of a cook, but he'd downloaded a dozen simple recipes and bought 3 different kinds of pasta Emily might like. Behind him, the radio hummed quietly, a soft jazz station that helped drown out the ticking clock and the low rumble of thunder beyond the windows. Emily was in the living room, building a castle out of couch cushions. She wore a red hoodie that was a size too big, sleeves hanging over her hands, and socks with mismatched stripes. Hope, the doll, sat on top of the highest cushion, keeping watch. Michael glanced over at her. Hey, Em, soup's almost done. Do carrots float? She asked without looking up. Only if you don't weigh them down with noodles. She grinned. I'm making a tower for Hope. She wants to see the sky when the storm comes. Michael turned back to the pot. Hope's braver than me. As if on cue, a sharp crack of thunder rolled across the sky. It was sudden and violent, rattling the apartment windows. Michael froze. Behind him, he heard the sound of cushions tumbling. Emily, he called. No answer. He set down the knife and stepped into the living room. The fort had collapsed. Hope lay on the carpet, face down. There was no sign of Emily. Then he heard it, the soft scrape of a closet door down the hall. He moved quickly, but not loudly. He didn't call her name again. Instead, he knelt in front of the hall closet and gently opened the door. Emily sat inside, curled in the corner. Her knees were hugged to her chest, her eyes wide and glassy. The necklace was clutched tightly in her fist. Michael lowered himself to the floor, just outside the threshold. He didn't try to pull her out. It's okay, he said gently. You can stay in there as long as you need. I'll be right here. She didn't speak, but she blinked slowly. Once, then twice. Her breathing was shallow, her small shoulders trembling with every boom of thunder. My mom used to hide with me during storms, she whispered after a long pause. We'd sit in the bathroom and she'd hum. But after she got sick, I had to hum by myself. Michael felt something inside him crack. I'm not a very good hummer, he said, but I could try. She didn't move, but she didn't stop him. So he did. Off-key and quiet, Michael hummed a lullaby he half remembered from a movie. It was soft, broken by the occasional breath or distant growl of thunder. After a while, Emily rested her head against the closet wall and let her knees fall, slightly apart. I thought maybe if I didn't make noise, the storm would forget I was here. Michael kept humming. After several minutes, she whispered, Are you mad at me? He stopped. Why would I be mad? Because I'm hiding again. Emily, he said gently, being scared doesn't make you bad. It makes you human. Her fingers tightened around the necklace. I just don't want you to go away. I'm still here, he said, and I'll be here tomorrow, and the day after that. Even if you're scared, even if you're mad, even if you hide. She looked at him through the dark. Even if I cry too much? Michael smiled softly. Especially then. A long silence followed. Then slowly she slid across the floor of the closet and into his lap. She was light and warm and trembling. He wrapped his arms around her and held her through the storm. That night, after the clouds cleared and Emily fell asleep on the couch mid-story, Michael called Dr. Lillian Monroe. The therapist's voice came through the phone, calm and warm. "How's she doing?" "Better," he said. "Worse. I don't know." "That's normal, doctor," Monroe replied. "Trauma isn't a straight line. It loops. It tricks you. She had a panic attack tonight. Thunder. She hid in the closet. I didn't know what to do." "You did exactly what you should have," Monroe said. "You stayed." Michael glanced over at Emily, curled up under a quilt, one hand resting over her necklace. "It doesn't feel like enough." "She's not testing you to see if you're perfect, Michael. She's testing whether you'll leave." He was quiet. "Have you started the parenting course yet?" she asked. "Tomorrow." "Good. Keep showing up. That's the job." The next morning, Michael sat in the back row of a fluorescent-lit room at the Community Resource Center. There were 6 other adults there, 2 single moms, a young couple, and a middle-aged man with a blank stare. The instructor was a woman in her 50s with a sharp wit and a tired smile. Her name was Carla Reed, and she didn't waste time. "Forget what you think parenting looks like," she said. "Forget Pinterest. Forget sitcoms. Parenting kids with trauma isn't about rules. It's about repair. It's not about raising your voice. It's about lowering your threat. Any of you think you're here to become heroes, leave now. That's not what these kids need. They need co-regulators. They need calm. They need presence." Michael sat very still. At the break, Carla approached him. She had a weathered face, freckles across her cheeks, and a direct gaze that cut through excuses. "You're the cop, right?" she asked. "Yes." "You look terrified." "I am." "Good," she said. "Means you might actually listen." Back home that evening, Emily sat cross-legged on the living room floor, cutting shapes from colored paper. The storm was gone. Sunlight glinted through the window, and she was humming softly to herself. Michael sat beside her, folding along the same lines. "What are we making?" he asked. "A family," she said. "Paper people who stick together." He nodded. "Can mine be wearing a badge?" she giggled. "As long as he has kind eyes." When they finished, she held the row of dolls up to the light. "Can I hang this in my room?" "Of course." That night, as he tucked her in, she touched the necklace again. "I was scared yesterday," she whispered. "I thought maybe the thunder would scare you too." "I used to be scared of storms," he said, "but not anymore." "Why?" "Because now, when it gets loud, I remember I have someone to sit with." Emily smiled sleepily. "You mean me?" "I mean you." She closed her eyes. "Then I think I'm not scared anymore either." Michael turned off the light and sat beside her until her breathing slowed. The storm had passed, but something else had arrived in its place. Not certainty, not perfection, but presence. And sometimes that was more than enough. Sometimes the miracle we pray for doesn't arrive in thunder or lightning. Sometimes it comes in the form of a quiet voice calling out for help, and a heart willing to answer. Michael didn't know how to be a father. Emily didn't know how to trust again. But through fear, through storms, through the long nights of doubt, love stayed. And where love stays, God moves. This story reminds us that God's hand is not always loud, but it is always near. He works through people, through those who show up, through those who hold on when others let go. Maybe you're waiting for a miracle right now. Maybe someone's waiting for you to be theirs. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Leave a comment below and tell us your thoughts. And if you believe God still sends miracles in quiet ways, write amen in the comments. Subscribe for more stories that restore faith and remind us that even the smallest light can break through the darkest night. May God bless you and the people you love, today, tomorrow, always.